daughter's probably going, yeah, Mom, you don't even know how to use that. But I actually do have Facebook, and I do have a Twitter account. So I'm on my way. Well, I haven't found it yet, but I'm working on that. Haven't found my password yet. I'd like to now welcome back Jack Bedessem from Wogesa to the stage, and Jack's going to give us an update on their efforts. So Jack, come on up.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. I don't know. Yep, I found PowerPoint. I'm not quite as good as that gal yesterday morning. I still need a PowerPoint to get across most of my points I'm trying to make and remind me what I'm supposed to be saying. This is a kind of an exciting year for us, and like I mentioned last night, coming up here in August will be Wogosa's 4th anniversary. It's kind of hard to believe that the organization has been around for 4 years already. I can tell you that we've certainly come a long way. We've jumped through a lot of hoops. We've had a lot of hurdles to climb over, and it hasn't been all a smooth ride. But I think for the most part, we're well on our way, and I think this summit is certainly one of the things to show for part of our efforts. So, would you go to the next slide? Like I mentioned, Wogosa was formed in 2010. It was kind of came as a recommendation from one of the task forces that Governor Freudenthal had established prior to that. Go to the next slide and jump through this really quick. One of the first things that we did when the organization was formed was to identify a vision statement, which is incident-free operations, as well as some objectives that the organization was going to try to work towards. So why don't you go to the next slide. So just to give you some idea of what Wogosa consists of, we have as an organization, we have bylaws, we have articles, we have 13 board members, and at this time, I would like those 13 board members, those ones that are here today, to stand up. We've got Nate Nordine, we've got Denny Gladwin, we've got Ken Lanta, so we've got Sid Miller, we've got Sam Whitney, and I think that might be all of them that we've got present here today. But we have a really good board, and I'd like to give these guys a round of applause. They put in tireless hours and a lot of hard work. So one of the other things that Wogosa started doing here a couple of years ago was adding advisors to our board. There are so many other organizations throughout the state that have very similar goals, very similar objectives, or same efforts. We thought there needed to be a way that we could coordinate the efforts of these different organizations, and so we started establishing advisors to the Wogosa board, and vice versa. Wogosa has advisors on several of the other boards out there. Membership is free to join. We've got close to 1,000 members now, and after this meeting, maybe we'll make that number of 1,000 members. This is just a list of our board members. Those I did not mention just a few minutes ago that are on our board: Wendy Bowman with Ultra Petroleum, Kira Johnson with Rocky Mountain Wellness, David Stewart with Encana, Pete Dosinus with Schlumberger, Chris Corliss with Patterson UTI, and then we have one vacant position that we're going to be filling here shortly. Would you go to the next slide? These are our key advisors that we have. We got Mike Todd from Wyoming OSHA, Susan Sharp with WISRA, Don Burkhart with the PAW Safety Committee, Bob Mall from WTA, and Brenda Burkle are advisors, and they attend a good portion of the meetings. We have 4 standing committees that are ongoing all the time. We've got a training committee is headed by Andrew Winnie, a communications committee, OSHA regulatory committee, a legislative committee, and then we also have several special committees that get together and do what they need to do on an as needed basis. Why don't you jump to that next slide? Okay. This slide just kind of covers some of our key accomplishments from 2010 to 2014. Probably one of the, I think the greatest impacts that we've had over the last few years is the training that we've provided through events like this, helping to coordinate some of the training sessions. We also have 2 or 3 membership meetings a year, which are centered around various training sessions. We typically will go out to our membership and ask the membership what do they see as hot topics, where do they see gaps in the training needs, and we'll put together training sessions to help fill those needs. So we're also in the process of revamping our website right now, so hopefully we can get that up and running and be very user-friendly here very soon. We've just updated our alliance with Wyoming OSHA, and we're hoping to have that renewed and signed here within the next couple of months. Like I mentioned, we've helped facilitate member meetings and helped facilitate this summit. One of the other things that we've done is we've gotten industry support together, representatives from the industry to help review and provide comments on changes to various rules and regulations that are safety-related rules and regulations for the oil and gas industry, and working closely with OSHA, getting that representation together with OSHA to help facilitate those changes. And then we've continued with our Stop Work Authority award program. As for those of you who were here last night, that's a program that is very dear to our heart, and we think it has the potential to affect a lot of people's lives if more companies, more individuals were to utilize their Stop Work Authority. So, okay, some of the goals and initiatives for 2014. One of the things that we've learned over the years is that with a group like ours, there are hundreds of thousands of good ideas that come up throughout the course of the year. Literally, there are so many things that we would like to do, to try to do, that we just can't do them all. And we've fallen in that trap. We've tried to do too much at one time, and so we've decided that we really need to focus and prioritize on those goals and initiatives throughout the year that make the most sense, that provide the most value. And so for the remainder of 2014, we've kind of narrowed down our list of priorities to continue with the safety training as we identify gaps that are needed. We are going to finalize our bylaws. WGOSA was incorporated as a nonprofit this year, and so we need to update and finalize the revisions to our bylaws. We're continuously trying to get more companies involved with WGOSA, particularly actively involved with WGOSA or some of the other safety alliances that you've heard from. We want to facilitate another member meeting in the fall of this year. That will be a short meeting with some training sessions and a short business meeting. And then one of the other things that we're kind of working on the side is we've approached the University of Wyoming about establishing a bachelor's program for either occupational health and safety or environmental health and safety, something along that lines. And they're actually making some progress and have shown some interest in developing that program. So hopefully we'll have more news about that here shortly in the future. So next slide. This is just kind of some of our vision that we've put together. You've always got to have a vision if you're going to be shooting for something. And so I kind of titled this one The Next Level. I've talked a little bit about taking Wagosa to the next level. I'm not going to read through the whole thing, this whole list, but one of the things that we see possibly out in the future with all of the other alliances that are beginning to get their feet under them is that finding ways to collaborate the efforts amongst those different alliances across the state, across the different industries better, whether there's an umbrella organization that would facilitate that collaboration. We see that as a very real good possibility that could be very effective across the state. And then shooting for some stable funding at some point in time, and actually having a full-time executive director and staff to help with some of our initiatives. Because like I mentioned, sometimes there are so many alternate or ideas that come up that we think would be good for the industry. We just don't have enough time to get it all done on a volunteer basis. So, and that's my presentation, an update on Wagosa.
All right, thank you, Jack. And before we get to our keynote speaker, Jacy Good, this morning we will have an update from our newest alliance, the Construction Safety Alliance. Dave McElrath, who's the safety officer for High Country Construction in Lander, will come up and give us an update on the new Construction Alliance. Dave?
Good morning. I'm honored to be here. Thank you to Wagosa, Workforce Development, for putting on such an awesome event. And Wyoming Construction Safety Alliance hopes to be partners with this sometime in the near future. We just started. We've had 2 board of directors meetings. And yesterday during the tornado, half of us went out to take pictures of the tornado, the other half went to the stairwell. But we had a very good meeting yesterday. Last month we came up with our mission statement. It's simple and sweet. The Wyoming Construction Safety Alliance is dedicated to improving the safety culture of Wyoming's construction industry. We all know what safety culture is. We all live it. We breathe it. Safety starts from the top down, and Governor Meade last night and through other initiatives has proven that safety does in fact start in Wyoming at the top. It's up to us as safety professionals to take it to the bottom, to live it, to breathe it, to safe it forward, as Mike Todd likes to say. Anyhow, at this time I'd like to introduce our board of directors. I'm going to ask them to stand up. I'm going to put my old man glasses so I can read their small writing. Okay, again, I'm the chairman. For anybody who doesn't recognize me, I usually wear a hat. Or anybody who needs these safety glasses in the dark ones so I don't blind you, you're welcome to them. Anyhow, I'm Dave McElrath with High Country Construction. I was elected chairman. I'm very truly humbled and honored to be chairman of this great group of people. Co-chairman is Chris Morgan from Automatic Electronics. Our communications is Rick Rubelt from Hazelton. Our Katie Legursky with Wyoming Contractor Safety Contractor Association. She's here with us. So she's somewhere. There she is. Okay. I have Bob Switzer with Wyoming Financial Insurance. Tom Fox with COP Wyoming. Martin Vaughn with Samson. I'm just trying to make sure I don't forget everybody. Oh, Tom. So Tom's going to hit me when I get down. But anyway, Tom Waterhouse. And these gentlemen and ladies and gentlemen have stepped forward, stepped to the plate to start this new organization. We're taking baby steps. We're going to make it. I'd like to thank our advisors and ask them to stand up as well. We have 3 currently. We're going to hopefully get more. Dennis Gladwin has been instrumental to starting this organization. The board of directors is deeply into his debt because he's helped us, and we hope we can follow in Waigisa's footsteps. And then we have Dan Buckley with OSHA, and he's back here, and Mike Todd. Anyway, we appreciate every one of those. We are just now signing up for memberships. We've got a great list going. Back at the OSHA table, just outside the door to the left, we have a list if you guys want to join as a member. There is no cost. Please come on out and sign up. And our next meeting is July 30th at the Oil and Natural Gas Industry Building in Casper, the new one. And it's we'll start at 10 a.m. and we'll have a board meeting at 8 a.m. Anyways, we're tickled and honored to be involved with Wyoming in the safety culture, and we're dedicated to improving that and getting our injuries down. Folks, some of you out here have 0 TIRs. As a state, if a company can do it, the state can do it. That's what we need to work for and achieve. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave. That was a great update, and your efforts are really getting off the ground, so thank you so very much. I now have the privilege of introducing our keynote speaker for this morning. Jacy Good is here with us today, and her message is particularly important to us here in Wyoming, as we see a very high number of deaths on our Wyoming roads and that are transportation related. A distracted driver on a cell phone forever changed her life, and she now spends her days educating others about the preventable pain that happens on our roads each and every day. She's here to share her incredible story and inspire us all to make safer choices on the road. It's been a pleasure to visit with her and meet her. I think you will all agree. Jacy, come on up.
It looks nice from up here. Hi, everyone. I am Jacy, and I am so grateful I get to be here. And I hope I can bring you guys into my world. I was given kind of a great big story, and I'm not strong enough to hold it all on my own. And so that's why I need to share it with you, to try and put you in my shoes. Imagine what your life would be if this happened to your family. And so to tell that story, even though it's really just my life story, I don't remember it all. So I need help. And I'm really incredibly lucky that I've got this husband who I think is incredibly cute and charming. I think I have to say that. We've only been married for 6 months. He's here in video form, and he's going to help me kind of fill in the blanks that I don't have in my own memory.
Hi there, I'm Steve Johnson, coming to you from my apartment here in White Plains, New York. I'm lucky enough to get to share it with that beautiful girl standing in front of you right now. Presentation's going to be about 45 minutes long. You'll see me popping up a few times in electronic form just to fill in the parts of the story that Jacy can't tell on her own. It's going to start with a couple introductory slides, and then we're going to get right into our story. Enjoy.
All right, so we've got to start by just talking about driving. Driving is really dangerous, and I don't need to read to you, but it's the #1 killer pretty much in just about every workplace. And I know you guys work in a pretty dangerous industry, and there's a lot of deaths and a lot of injuries from a lot of different things. But in talking to different people, realizing that right around 50%, half of those deaths are happening on the road. Something about a hippopotamus told me that, I think. And so we kind of started to look at this. The National Safety Council keeps a lot of data about what's causing these crashes. You know, why we just kind of turn a blind eye. We kill each other and look the other way. So what's causing these crashes? And the National Safety Council did some really extensive research looking into that data and finding, all right, there's a couple different things that cause car accidents. There's mechanical issues. You know, if you don't get your car inspected, something goes wrong in your car. Yeah, that causes some accidents. There's environmental issues, which I don't think I ever want to be in Wyoming in the winter. You know, it's something you do run into, but you have absolutely no control over that. You just got to be a little extra cautious. Then the big one down here is human error. And I don't understand a lot about all this statistic stuff, but definitely 70% of the time a car accident happens because we screwed up, because we make a mistake. And the probability, up to 93% of the time, that our mistake causes a lot of pain. And when you step back and kind of start to look into that, obviously there's a lot of things we do when we're on the road that maybe we kind of sort of know we probably shouldn't do. And the big one that I get to talk about is cell phones. Right now we know it's right around 26%, a quarter of the accidents on our roads, because we can't resist that phone. And so that's where we get to start to segue to my story. This is a story about cell phones. But more than that, this is a story about family. And so this story has to start with Jay and Jean Good. I'm going to guess this picture was taken somewhere around 1972, 73. My parents met when they were 20 years old. They had grown up a couple towns apart in Amish country, Pennsylvania. And they met each other and just hit it off. You know, my mom was in college working to get her degree because she knew she wanted to be a teacher. My dad was in college, and I never quite got the whole story. You know, he was working to pay for it himself. And I think maybe he ran out of money, or he wasn't going to his classes, or he was doing too many drugs because it was the 70s and he got kicked out. Again, I never quite knew everything that happened there. But they dated, started dating when they were 20, got married when they were 27, and then bought land in Amish country, Pennsylvania, and built a house. Like on their own, with their own hands, built a house. And my mom had gotten a job as a teacher. My dad ended up getting a job as a mechanic, which was kind of a perfect fit for him. You know, he could fix anything he put his hands on. And so they built this house, and then my mom was settled. She was ready. She wanted to be a mom. My dad was a little slower to agree to that, which now that I'm the age they were, I can understand. He was scared. But then, as the story went, they were part of a volleyball league, you know, just friends that would play in each other's backyards. And one night they had a bunch of friends over to play volleyball, maybe had a little too much to drink, and then 9 months later, my brother was born. 3 years later, I was born, and thankfully, we were always really close. And even though we were, and continue to be, pretty big goofballs a lot of the time, my parents both agreed. They absolutely loved being parents, and were prouder of that than anything else they ever did. And so I had figured out that I wasn't good at a lot of things. You know, growing up trying to figure out what you want to do with your life. And I was never really great with my hands. You know, I could knit, but not that well. And I would try and build stuff, but it never ended well. You know, I played softball and was on the JV league through my senior year of high school. And I played volleyball until I got cut the second year I tried out. And then I ran cross country and finished last in every race. I knew I needed to find something that I was good at. And the thing that I was always good at was school. So it might have maybe turned me into a little bit of a nerd, but I knew that I wanted to go to college. I wanted to use my brain. It had come easily to me, and so I wanted to go as far as I could go. And so in high school, I worked really hard playing all those sports and being in every extracurricular activity I could do, and graduated at the top of my high school class and had gotten into my first choice college, a tiny little school in Allentown, Pennsylvania. So it was only an hour and a half from where I grew up, and it was a perfect fit for me. I got to college and had to stand on my own two legs. And I guess, thankfully, I made a friend right off the bat. This really cute guy who grew up right outside of New York City. This really cute guy named Steve. I met Steve the very first day we moved into our dorm rooms. I think his room was 2 or 3 doors down the hallway from mine. And we hit it off right off the bat. We came from really different worlds, but we were raised with the same values, and we wanted the same things in our lives, and we lasted. It worked. And we ended up being together all 4 years of college, right up to our graduation day. This was May 18th of 2008. And this was everything I had worked for my whole life. You got to work hard in high school to go to a good college. And then you got to work hard in college to get a good job. And I'd done exactly that. I guess by this point, I felt mobile. I didn't want to be too far from home, but I could go somewhere if it was going to make this Steve thing work, because that was kind of my biggest goal at this point in life. I wanted to make it work. And so Steve had gotten a job at home in New York, that he could live with his parents for a year to save up money. And I said, okay, if you're going to be in New York, there's no reason I can't be a New Yorker too. I suppose maybe thankfully I never got to find out if it would work for me. But I found this perfect job working for Habitat for Humanity, that I'd get to build houses just like my parents built my house. And so I'd move to Brooklyn. Steve and I would see each other on the weekends. After a year, he would have to propose to me, and we'd get engaged and move in together and get married and buy a house, and I'd have those kids I've always wanted in the blink of an eye. I had the next 10 years of our lives together planned. And my parents and I just had this really easy drive to get home, and then I'd be home for a month, and then that real life would start. So this was graduation. We graduated at 10 o'clock in the morning. It was a Sunday. My parents and I packed up everything I owned. I was moving. Packed it all up into our family station wagon, and we hit the road, I think, probably around 2 o'clock that afternoon. We got halfway home, and we stopped at a gas station. There's not really anything exciting about that. We almost always stopped at that gas station. But on that afternoon, stopping at that gas station is actually the very last memory that I have from my graduation day. And so that's where I need a little bit of help from Steve again, because I just have no memories of my own.
I called and texted Jacy a couple times each just to let her know that I'd gotten home, because that was our rule. If you're traveling 2 hours or more, let the other person know when you're safe on the other side. I always thought it was a stupid rule, but she wears the pants in the relationship, so she always got what she wanted. She wasn't responding, but it didn't mean much to me because it was graduation day and she could be busy doing anything, celebrating at dinner, unpacking, whatever. But it was those calls and texts piling up on her phone, which is the reason that I got called first that night. My phone rang around 6 p.m. and I picked up and I said, "Hey, babe," but it just wasn't her voice on the other side. This person said, "My name is Barb. I'm a chaplain at the Reading Hospital in Pennsylvania, and there's been an accident." That line just destroyed me. She wouldn't tell me anything about the accident, just needed me to answer questions. How long is Jacy's hair? What color are her eyes? What's her birthday? Her social security number? And I answered the best I could, but all the while in the back of my head, I was just thinking, Jacy can't answer these questions for herself. At the end of the call, she asked me who she should call next. I told her to call Jacy's brother, Jared. She said she would, and she'd call me back within 2 hours. It took about 15 seconds after hanging up for everything to really sink in, but then I just lost it and started crying like I'd never cried before. And that's the way it went for 2 hours, but I never got a call after 2 hours. And then I had convinced myself that she was gone. This person who I'd been in love with for 3.5 years, who my entire future revolved around, the only girl I'd ever even kissed, was gone forever. And I just didn't know what to do with myself. Luckily, I only had to feel that way for 20 or 30 minutes because my phone rang again, and it was Jared. It was her brother. And the first thing he said was, Jacy's alive. He said she's got 2 broken feet, a broken tibia, a broken fibula, a shattered pelvis, a broken wrist, a broken collarbone, a lacerated liver, partially collapsed lungs, damaged carotid arteries, and some sort of traumatic brain injury. But she was in surgery. And to me, that meant she's going to be okay. You know, she's in a hospital, in surgery, with doctors. People get better after that. That's the way it works. And so I was kind of floating on air. But then the next thing he said was, unfortunately, neither of my parents made it. And I was right back to where I'd been a minute earlier. These people who treated me like I was one of their own, and who I just loved so much, and who I knew were going to be the greatest grandparents to my children someday, were gone. I'd been with them 5 hours earlier, celebrating the day. I went up to Jacy's apartment to say goodbye to them, told them I'd see them in a few weeks when we were going to move Jacy into Brooklyn, but that's it. Never going to talk to them, never going to see them, never going to hug them ever again. But truthfully, at that moment, I could only think about Jacy, so my parents and I packed our bags and got right on the road and drove the 3 hours to the hospital in Pennsylvania. We were brought into this room, and there was Jacy's family, people who had just lost their children or their siblings, or in Jared's case, both of his parents. After about half an hour of hugging and crying, the neurosurgeon walked in the room after 8.5 hours of surgery and said, Jacy's alive, she's out of surgery, you can go see her 2 at a time. So Jared and I kind of linked arm in arm and supported each other as we walked down this hallway to the last room in the ICU, where this is more or less what we saw. I'm pretty sure this picture is from day 4, just because Jared is smiling over her. I don't think it's any earlier than that. The first thing I noticed was that her beautiful hair was gone. She had these tubes going down her throat, and on one side of the bed there were 12 different bags of whatever was keeping her alive feeding into her IV. She still had all this blood caked on her head because in almost 9 hours of surgery, they didn't do anything that wasn't absolutely necessary to keep her alive. But the most frightening image that night, and you don't really get it in this picture, was that her head was swollen to like twice its normal size. I mean, she looked like an alien. You wouldn't have thought a person could be alive and look the way she did. And I just remember standing there that first night thinking, if you didn't tell me that this was Jacy Good lying in that bed, the person I'd been dating for 3.5 years, I couldn't have told you who that was. And to me, that was really scarier than anything. A little bit after we first saw her, the neurosurgeon gave her just a 10% chance of living through that night. Now, this may come as a shock to you, but she did make it through that first night. She hit the first 24-hour mark and 36 and 48 and 72 and all these little milestones that the doctor said would give her an extra 10% chance of surviving. No one was talking about recovery, just would she live. She just kept hanging on. They call her the miracle child now when we go to that hospital because the doctors and nurses say they've never seen anyone with injuries like Jacy's recover the way she has. We were just so blessed the way things went. About 2 weeks after the accident, she started to wake up. She was only moving the right side of her body, which made sense because of where her brain injury was. We were just happy to see her moving at all. And she'd give us these like 5 or 10 minute windows in a day where we could say, give us a thumbs up, and she'd actually do it. So we knew she was capable of hearing and processing and reacting. But for the other 23 plus hours of the day, she was just completely in her own world. I mean, it was like she couldn't see the people in front of her, couldn't hear the people talking to her. And because she was in the state of sort of being awake but not aware, she just drove us absolutely crazy. I mean, she was pulling off all the little sticky heart monitors and stuff they'd had on her, and she actually ripped her feeding tube directly out of her stomach a few times, and she'd pick at this trachea tube in her neck like nonstop. She'd reach for it, I'd bat her away. She'd reach for it, I'd bat her away. For 2 hours straight, unrelenting. Like you have to be a robot or apparently a crazy brain-injured person to be as persistent as she was in doing this. It was insanity. And of course, all she knew was that I was stopping her from doing what she wanted to be doing, so she just beat the crap out of me, punching me as hard as she could. And I guess our fights never got to that level in college where fists were being used, but she's packing some serious heat in that right arm. I counted one day, she hit me over 200 times before I don't know, stopped counting because I was crying or something. If I wasn't fast enough pulling my hand away, she'd grab it, pull it to her mouth, and bite as hard as she could. She literally drew blood on my pinky 2 or 3 times. So I was going home every night, physically and emotionally, just as low as I could be. But, before I went to sleep each night, I convinced myself that things could only get better. They had to get better. And so I managed to get up every morning and get back to the hospital for another 12 or 13 hours of physical and emotional abuse. It was a month before she started to talk, rarely making any sense, but over time she made more and more. And then 2 months after the accident, we moved to a rehab hospital.
So, if I can defend myself. In my very injured brain, I thought that Steve was my brother. And you saw my brother. Jared is 6'4", 300 pounds. So my entire life, my only defense against him was to bite him. And so if Steve was Jared, I'm not quite sure how it all added up in my head, but it did at the time. Thankfully, I don't remember any of that. Apparently, I was in a whole lot of pain pretty much all the time, going through various surgeries, still just kind of hanging on to the edge of between life and death. But then finally, after 2 months, I was stable enough. I didn't need to live in the hospital anymore. I could move, I guess, into a different hospital, into the rehab hospital. And this is where kind of my brain started to come back around. It started with, again, just pain tolerance. This is what physical therapy looks like when you have a shattered pelvis. The biggest therapies were learning how to dress myself, trying to figure out who all these people in my life were, and brushing my teeth, counting, saying the alphabet, trying to read. I had always been the smart kid, and all of a sudden I could barely tell you what my own name was. But through a lot of hard work, 2 months living in that hospital, I just kept making progress. And the doctor said I was lucky I was that dorky smart kid, because my brain could figure out how to do things, even though it had lost a whole lot of brain cells over here. So finally, after 3 months, I got to a point where my bones were all healed enough that I could stand. I could start to learn how to walk. It took 3 months to even be able to be vertical, taking 2 or 3 steps in a day's time, trying to do what I could to take back some portion of what my life used to be. And so finally, after 4 months of living in hospitals, September 19th, 4 months and 1 day, I was released from the hospital and I moved back into my parents' house. And I think this is where the emotional end of things started to catch up with me. That in that first hospital, it was fight or die. There was nothing else my brain could be thinking about except keeping myself alive. In the second hospital, again, it was hard to ever get past the pain. But living in my parents' house and seeing that mom and dad weren't sleeping in their bed at night and mom and dad weren't going to work in the morning, and maybe my stupid big brother wasn't playing some kind of terrible practical joke on me. Maybe mom and dad had both been killed on that day. It still hurts too much to be true. But it was when I started asking questions. So, all right, I had been in a car accident. I figured that much out. It was why I was still in a wheelchair 90% of the time. But I had never been in a car accident in my 21 years of life at that point. My dad had never been in a car accident in my 21 years. He was driving. I knew he was driving. He was the safest driver I knew. What went so wrong to leave me in such an absolute miserable state on this day that started so perfectly? And so I knew my brother could play jokes on me, but the news had to tell me what happened. It had to tell me the facts. So I just got on my computer, and I think I probably just Googled my own name. And I found that my parents and I stopped at that gas station that I remember stopping at, maybe 5 miles down the road, less than that. We were going south. At this point, it's a really agricultural area. There's fields all around, 45 miles an hour, one lane in each direction. And there's an intersecting road. And as we got to the intersecting road, we came to a green light going south. And as we were going south, coming north, just opposite us, was an 18-wheeler. This professional truck driver who drove the route every week. And he had a routine. And the black box in his truck said he followed that routine. He had just stopped somewhere just a few minutes earlier. And the only place there is to stop just a few minutes earlier is a Dunkin' Donuts. So he got himself his coffee or his donut, whatever he always did. But at the same time, on the intersecting road coming to a red light was an 18-year-old young man, a senior in the high school there. And he was driving his mom's minivan. And his mom said, you can use your phone when you drive if you do what we consider safe. Put it on speakerphone. So that's what he did. He called his friend. He put his phone on speakerphone. He was just talking on the phone. And he got to that red light. His hands were on the steering wheel. He was looking out the windshield. Except his brain, for that millisecond, happened to be thinking more about this conversation he was having than the road in front of him. And so when he got to that red light, his eyes might have looked, but his brain never processed. He tried to turn left. And this 18-wheeler, this professional truck driver, didn't react. Hit the young man in this blue minivan, and I guess that kind of alerted him that he should be paying attention. I don't know what happened. Was he drinking his coffee? Was he eating a donut? Why didn't he react? Hit the young man, and then in a split-second decision, decided to swerve. But rather than swerving to the right into the cornfield, swerved to the left across the double yellow line, which is where my family station wagon happens to be at the wrong place at the wrong time that afternoon. There's no reason this was my family and not one of your families. Again, just where we happen to be on this day. But then a series of absolutely incredible things happens. You can see, still pretty rural Pennsylvania. But at this intersection, there happens to be a house. And in that house happens to live a man who happens to be a volunteer paramedic, Dave. Dave had gone to church that morning. He had just gotten home. He heard the sound of this crash that, he says, it was so loud, he knew it had to have been really bad. He came running outside to try and help. My dad had a really faint pulse, faded right away. Dave assures me he didn't suffer. The truck had just picked up 30 tons of milk, and my dad took the brunt of that impact. There was no way he could have survived. My mom had been in the rear passenger seat, so the farthest from the point of impact and the likeliest to have been okay, except when we left that gas station 5 minutes earlier. She didn't put her seatbelt back on. She ended up in the front seat. She didn't even have a pulse when Dave got to her. And I hope you can learn from my mom's mistake. We know that seatbelts save lives. Yeah, maybe it's kind of a pain in the neck to have to put it on. Takes all of 2 seconds. Kind of itches your neck a little bit maybe. Doesn't matter. It's what keeps people alive when these kind of car accidents happen. It's the reason I'm standing in front of you today. Between having my seatbelt on and Dave being there, knowing what to do. He came to me and I had a really strong pulse, but I wasn't breathing. I would have been another dead on the scene. This man hadn't come to help. He knew what he was doing and he moved my head and I, as he said, took a huge gasp for air. He kept me alive until the paramedics got there. The ambulance station is the next intersection down. Of all the things that went wrong on that day, a whole lot of things went right to let me stand in front of you today. Less than, I'm going to say, 10 to 15 minutes, the Reading Trauma Hospital with the trauma center. It had been built in 2005, just 3 years before this day, waiting to keep me alive. This trauma center filled with the doctors and nurses and surgeons and therapists and equipment and Lord knows what else you need to keep a person in surgery for 9 hours that night. I don't know what they did to me. I don't know how they kept me alive. I'm in touch with those doctors. They don't know how they kept me alive. All of those things coming together so perfectly because this story needs to be told. And I'll just kind of keep taking you chronologically because as I learned what had happened to me and what had caused this, a cell phone. We know it's dangerous to use a phone and drive. There's a whole lot of science out there about it, a whole lot of press going on to try and educate us. And again, it's inconvenient. We try and turn a blind eye, but unfortunately it's getting to a point that soon we won't be able to turn a blind eye. And so I needed to know everything there was to know. And I just got on my computer again. I think maybe the science fair nerd that still lives in here somewhere is trying to crawl its way back out. And I need to know what kind of evidence we have about this. So I just got on my computer and found quite literally decades of studies from the very first cell phones that were released that came with a warning not to use while you were in motion. You know, it took up your entire trunk if you actually had one in your car. But we knew, as convenient as they are, they're not quite the safest. And this first slide shows you putting a camera in the car to track our eyes. And on the left-hand side, you can see this red box. You're paying attention to the road, your eyes scan the road, you see pretty much everything in front of you. Then you look at the right-hand side, and again, this is just a person having a conversation. That you see this tunnel vision. All of a sudden, your brain forgets to scan the road. You just don't see up to 50% of the road in front of you. And that might be, like in this picture, a big yellow school bus, a kid getting off that bus, the red light on the road directly in front of you. Out here, as I've experienced, an antelope, all of these unpredictable things that you don't know what's going to happen on the road. And if your brain isn't there, you can't keep up with everything that's happening. And so scientists kind of dug a little deeper to see what this looks like, looking at our brains. And there's a lot of ways to be distracted in the car. But when we're looking at cell phones, you know, it might involve taking a hand off the wheel, might involve taking your eyes off the road. But okay, you've got the Bluetooth that's built into your car. You don't have to look away. You just push a button and it answers the phone. But that doesn't solve what's happening in our brains. This slide shows you on the left-hand side the activity in your brain when you're just driving. Like, yeah, you actually have to think about driving when you're doing it. But then on the right-hand side, we're multitasking. We're such great multitaskers. It's such a great attribute in this country in this time. Except when you do two things at a time, your brain hops back and forth between those two things. And if you're walking down the street and chewing gum, you know, it doesn't really require brain energy. But if you're doing two cognitively demanding things, if you're watching a TV show and paying attention, trying to see what's happening, and also talking to someone on the phone, can you do both of those? Can you tell me what happens in that show and tell me what happened on the phone? It's the same on the road. You've got to be paying attention with your eyes and with your brain. And so as we look at this and see that this happens every single day, but we're a little slow to catch up with the technology. And so again, continuing chronologically, we're now moving into winter of 2008, going into 2009. And it was at that point that all the court stuff finished up, and I learned that this happened in Pennsylvania, where there were no laws about cell phone use and driving. And that meant because it was caused by a cell phone, and that wasn't illegal, it didn't matter that 2 people were killed at the hands of 2 other drivers' mistakes. It wasn't illegal, so no crime was committed. It wasn't involuntary manslaughter or vehicular homicide or reckless driving, nothing. And that made me furious. It was a call to action. Maybe this story could make a difference. I found a politician trying to get a law passed. He said, you got to come to Harrisburg, come to the state capitol, and show my colleagues that these are real people. It's real families that are being impacted because of the choices that we make on the road. And when it's something like this, you're not only endangering your own life, but innocent people on the road whose lives are being taken because of these choices. So I went to Harrisburg and really very simply shared this story. In about 2 or 3 minutes, I shared this story. And unfortunately, that bill didn't go through, along with several since then. And I know Wyoming and Pennsylvania are kind of on the same bar here. We don't like to be told what to do. I don't like to be told what to do. But if you're putting my family, if you're putting the people I love at risk, I won't hesitate to tell you what to do, because it's not okay. And I suppose even though this bill didn't go through, it got my name out as an advocate on the issue, which really started to change my life. I spent the next year doing whatever I could to make this count, to make it mean something. And so shortly after doing this, Steve convinced me to move to New York. I wasn't happy about that, but we couldn't work. I was still in therapy every day. His parents said we could come and live with them. It made a lot of sense at the time to move to New York. So we moved to New York, and I got really involved with Governor Cuomo. New York's Governor Cuomo has done a lot to make New York's laws some of the strongest in the whole country. Unfortunately, it's not the whole solution. But as I started to do more and more work, in the top right-hand corner, I got to go and share this story at the United Nations. This is a picture with Ban Ki-moon, who is the Secretary General of the United Nations, calling for an end to the global epidemic of distracted driving. Like AIDS is a global epidemic because it kills thousands of people every year. Cell phones and driving are a global epidemic because it kills thousands and thousands of people every year. And then I get to come down to this exciting bottom picture. When you do something on the international level, like I got to do at the United Nations, apparently eventually that makes it all the way to Chicago, and some famous people like Oprah decide to tackle this issue. And Oprah has done a ton of work to kind of go beyond the legislation and look at this from the cultural perspective, that it's not okay for us to kill each other, that we need to make our cars, as she said, we need to make them no phone zones. And so as I've continued to work, doing what I can to show the world that I'm a real person. I'm a person who is impacted every single moment of every day because of one person's choice 6 years ago. But it's not only me, it's not only my family that's impacted. And I want you to think about your families, think about the people you love, and then imagine one of those people vanishing. And I would guess that some people in this room, if not most people in this room, have experienced the loss of a loved one. And when that happens, how far the ripples from that pain can go. You know, obviously my family was cut in half. It hurts every single day. But it goes so much farther than that. And I want you to think about your kids. What if your child was my brother, who had to get the call that night to learn that both of his parents had been killed and his little sister probably wasn't going to make it? Could your kids plan a funeral for you? Could your parents bury you? My grandparents were all over 85 years old and had to bury their children. But then who else does this go to? You know, the fact that my mom was the awesome 8th grade English teacher, and the next day was Monday, May 19th, and that meant 300 13-year-old kids came to the middle school to learn that for so many of them, their favorite teacher was never coming back. Those other teachers in the school, my mom's best friend on this whole planet, her friends having to finish that school day, finish that school year. Even still, 6 years later, I'm in touch with those teachers, and they always tell me that the middle school will never be the same without Mrs. Good's always smiling face in those hallways, and the productivity that might be lost there. And then looking at my dad. My dad worked in a foundry. No, it wasn't a glamorous job, but he was incredibly good at what he did. And I know I've spoken many times. I'm friends with the higher-ups in that company. And they initially hired, they hired and fired a bunch of people, 3 or 4 within the first 2 or 3 years, because no one could do the job like my dad was able to do. I think at this point they now have 2 people working in the one position that my dad used to be able to hold down on his own. And so looking at that productivity, looking at how far these ripples go, we need to talk about what we can do, because this happens every single day. We know within the US, this slide shows you 15 faces in a day's time. That's right around how many people, somewhere between 10 and 15 people getting killed because we can't resist that phone. And I get it. I love my phone. I live on my phone, except when I'm driving. And so how can we make this difference? We know it's dangerous. We know it's killing thousands. We know it hurts. But maybe it's never happened to you. Maybe you're convinced you're invincible. I'm a good driver. It won't happen to me. I was a good driver too. It was never going to happen to me. But here I stand. So it means figure out what works for you. If you've got to use the headset, keep it short. Say, I'm driving. Say, I don't feel safe being on the phone. It means for me, I can't do it at all. I don't let myself. It's not okay. Put it in the glove box. Put it in your purse in the back seat. I keep it out of sight, out of mind. Usually I put it on silent when I'm in the car, so the temptation is not even there. And I know if someone calls me, it'll go to my voicemail. And my voicemail says, I might be driving right now. Leave me a message and I'll call you back when I'm safe. And for me, that kind of sets a standard. I'm not going to be talking on my phone when I'm on the road. Please don't call me when you're on the road. And it also has to come from every aspect. If you're receiving a call and someone says they're driving, tell them to call you back when you're safe. If you're just the passenger in the car, and this one's maybe a little bit scary, but even if you're just sitting in the passenger seat, you have to have the courage to be able to speak up.
My first day back from winter break, sophomore year of high school, an old friend of mine got in the car after school that day with his best family friend who was a junior. His friend was doing 90 where he should have been doing 45, and my buddy in the passenger seat who ended up dead. And I've always just wondered, did Frankie feel comfortable going so fast in that car that day? And obviously we'll never know. But the point is, you have to be able to turn to a friend, a colleague, a cab driver, whoever it is, and say, would you please slow down, or let me take that call, or I'll send that text, because the day you don't do it could be that day.
We all feel invincible until we're proven otherwise. And maybe this quote up here sounds corny, but it's also 100% true. You'll never know if you've saved a life by driving a little bit safer or by being a responsible passenger, but you'll sure as hell know if you've done the opposite. It doesn't matter who you are, where you are in life, they're just not shoes that you want to be in.
And so to start to wrap up a little bit, I want to bring you into my world today. And I think that has to start in spite of all of this, because of all of this. I think I'm the luckiest person alive. Right now, this is what I do as a job, crazily enough. I never thought I'd be able to do this. But the more I did it, the more empowered I became, seeing that this story can make a difference. And maybe as much as was taken, all of us can do something to give back, to make my parents' deaths actually count for something. And so I get to travel the country. This is my very first time in Wyoming, and I got to experience a tornado, which was really exciting. Although, I don't know, Ken gave me the option of escaping to the basement down in the depot or going out to the car to watch it. I chose the basement. In retrospect, I definitely should have chosen the car. But it's this really incredible career, trying to make a little bit of a difference. That means that for some reason, Steve stuck by my side through all of this, even when I didn't know who he was, even when he couldn't get close to me without me biting him. he stuck around. I came around, thankfully, and after only 9 years of dating each other, just last fall, we decided we could make it official and threw this absolutely perfect wedding day. And it was such an amazing day, except I didn't have my mom to help me pick out that wedding dress, and I didn't have my daddy to walk me down the aisle or give me that last dance. Could your daughter walk herself down the aisle? Something that was taken that still hurts me every day. But as my parents raised me to do, you've always got to try and find the good in a situation. And so I'm glad to see a couple women in this audience. So maybe some of you watch this TV show where you can go and try on wedding dresses, and if you find a dress that you like, you might say yes to the dress. Do you have any fans out there? Steve's little sister filled out the application, surprised me that I was going to go on the show. I told her I absolutely was not going to go on the show. I'm not exactly a say yes to the dress. I love watching it, but I only shop at Kohl's. Why would I want a designer wedding dress? She reminded me that it was an opportunity to share this message of one day of my life that's reflective of what every day of my life is, of living without my parents and living in this body, because this is what I get. A brain injury never goes away. So that means this is about what my arm can do. Can't move my wrist or my fingers or my ankle or my toes or really anything on the left side of my body, because my brain doesn't know how to do that. And that's every day. That's figuring out still how to dress myself, how to put my contacts in, how to brush my teeth, all these things. Driving a car, cooking, cleaning, the things I used to love to do, going for a run or playing softball that this body hasn't quite figured out how to do again. And it's all because this one person made a choice to use his phone and drive. And so I hope that by sharing this not very easy story to share, I hope that you can see why this matters. I hope just as a human being, because we're all members of the same species, and we got to look out for each other. And hopefully that's why it matters to you just as a person. But it's also really important kind of from the corporate, from the company perspective. And I guess, I don't know, do your companies have policies? Do you know? Do we have a show of hands of people who have policies out there? All right, that is awesome to see. Does anyone not really know if their company has a policy? Maybe it's there, maybe it's not. We know a lot of places are putting policies into place. And there's some big names out there. And I think I might even have some of you guys today. Am I speaking to any of these companies? Chevron's here, right? Is that up there? That you guys are making a difference. When these big name companies put policies into place, it's kind of taking a stand for safety. And when you look at this and see, all right, well, what happens? And the National Safety Council looked into that. Because when you're on the road, it's downtime. When you're in Wyoming, I know you take some long trips across the state. You can use that time to catch up. So what about productivity? Aren't we losing all kind of time by not using our phones when we're on the road? National Safety Council looked at that again. What about productivity? People pretty much all agree that it's dangerous to use a phone. 95% of these employees, after a year of having this policy in place, they said, no, actually we didn't lose, we weren't less productive. And 10% actually said, all right, we were more productive. That maybe those things you're doing in the car aren't as important as you think they are. And it feels like it. It's hard to step back and kind of really examine what we're doing and how good of a job we're doing while we're doing it. When you do two things at a time and your brain's hopping back and forth between doing those two things, how maybe you're not doing a very good job of either one of them. I've had a couple experiences of calling someone and having to tell them my name 3 or 4 times before they could figure out who I was. And then I'd say, are you driving? Call me back when you're safe. And my favorite number up here, this bottom one, that it's not just on the workplace. It's when you set this habit. It's just routine to put your seatbelt on, to put your phone in the glove box. 83% of people said, all right, we stopped doing it at work, and we realized This is good. This works. And it carried over into their everyday lives too. And you know, that means you're setting a model. Would you want to share the road with yourself? Think about what all the other drivers out there are doing. What about when your kids are riding with you? Do you want them to drive the way that you drive? We've got to be role models in everything we do. And so as we keep looking at this, trying to figure out what we can do, what's really the solution. You know, laws are good, but don't tell me what to do. But what can we do? It means we've all got to make this commitment. It's got to start with you, and it's got to start like today on your drive home. Figure out what works for you. And so that's why I share this story, to bring you guys into my world, to think about your families and the people you love, to say, all right, that text, that email, that phone call, it can wait. It's not more important than my life. It's not more important than my daughter having her daddy to walk her down the aisle. Because if we don't do something, it's only a matter of time until all of us fall somewhere in this ripple. And that's why I'm here, because I want to put you in my ripple. This is the hand of cards I was dealt. I don't want this hand of cards, but maybe by sharing this story, we can start a new ripple, but the other kind of ripple, where there's no excuses anymore. There's nothing on our phones that's more important than a human life. I think that's everything I have to say. My website is hangupanddrive.com. You can use this story. You can be in touch. If you think this is something that would fit in at your company, I would be more than happy to come back to Wyoming. Hopefully no tornadoes next time, though. and help me make this difference. At this point, I think I'll be around for another hour or two, but then Ken said he's going to take me out to get a real bison burger so I can get the full experience of Wyoming. Thank you so much for having me, and please don't hesitate to come talk to me.
Thank you so much, Jacy, for a very powerful story and sharing that with us. We admired the courage, and we're thankful to you for shining a much-needed spotlight on the problem of distracted driving and, more importantly, its prevention. Thanks again. Now, let's remember to look at our agenda. At 9:15, we'll go into our first breakout session, and then it'll be followed by the 10:15 set. So there's some great breakouts. Remember that we're going to be sharing on social media. If you happen to go to a breakout, it may be repeated the next hour. So right now we're going to take a brief break, but let's not forget about our lunch hour. We're going to have some spectacular presentations and a very amazing veteran tribute. So please join us back here at 12 o'clock. We will take that much needed break at this time and go to our breakouts at 9:15. Thank you.
But I rap to the beat just the same. I got a little face and a pair of rhyme. All I'm here to do, ladies, is hypnotize. Sing it on and on and on and on and on. The beat don't stop until the break of dawn. I sing it on and on and on and on and on like a hot butter. The pop, the pop, the pop, give it, pop, the pop, pop. You don't dare stop, come alive, y'all. Give me what you got. I guess by now you can take a hunch and find that I am the baby of the bunch, but that's okay. I still keep it strong, cause all I'm here to do is just a wiggle your behind. Sing it on and on and on and on. The beat don't stop until the break of dawn. I sing it on and on and on and on and on. Rock, y'all. Throw it on the floor. I'm gonna freak your head. I'm gonna freak your day. I'm gonna move you out of this atmosphere. Cause I'm one of a kind and I'll shock your mind. I put the jig to the sing yo behind. I say the 1, 2, 3, 4. Come on, girls. Get on the floor. Come alive, y'all. Give me what you got. Cause I'm guaranteed to make you rock. I said 1, 2, 3, 4. Tell me one, what are you waiting for? To the hip. Hop, the hip to the hip and the hip, hip, hop.